Okay, everybody, I'm so excited today because I'm joined by Gavin's folks who plays Lionel Strong in House of the Dragon. We're talking spoilers here, so make sure you're caught up on the show first before you watch this interview. Gavin, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. I'm good. My feet are still smoking from the fire at Harrenhal, but I'm good,
Oh
mate. I'm
man.
really good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Yeah, what a tragic ending for Lionel. And we're gonna talk all about that. Before we even get to that craziness, what was the audition process like for a part like this?
Mental. But actually, for me, really quick. I was one of the last ones to get cast, so I did a just a self tape, and then about 3 days later, I had to do a Zoom meeting with Kate, the casting director, and I thought, well, I'll have to do another one with the showrunners. And then I got a phone call 2 days later saying I got it. I was a bit like,
Wow.
really? This is like, if this is the job I think it is, that was good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's really awesome. And how important was your theater experience for a part like that?
I think there is a certain skill set that you can transfer, and I think that's to do with the slightly heightened language of it. If you've done a lot of classical theatre or indeed musical theatre where you're speaking in verse or speech that is not prose, it's not how we chat to each other now, then it gives you a sense of being able to normalize that to make it naturalistic.
Yeah, for sure. And I could totally see that with a show like this. And was it scary for you being cast in such a huge property like Game of Thrones?
Yeah, can I swear?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Go for it.
I shit myself. Yeah. I was over the moon. I mean, I cried when my agent called. I cried. I was getting it was in the time of PCRs. I was getting PCR for another film job, and my agent called me, and I was waiting for a result of that test, and I sobbed like a child. And then I thought, oh my God, I've got to do it. Now I've actually got to be in this thing and try and do a decent job. And it was incredible. The first day was terrifying because it was surrounded by like Rhys Ifans and Paddy Considine, Graham McTavish, Bill Patterson, David Horowitz. They're all, and Paddy's one of my absolute heroes. So it was terrifying.
Yeah, I could imagine. That's awesome to hear though that you take it so seriously and that it means a lot to you. That's really cool. And it's interesting you mentioned Patty. So was that a great experience just acting wise, having him as your main seat partner most of the time? Anything you learned from him?
Oh, buckets. I was nicking stuff from him all the time. I was stealing everything. But he's a very generous actor, and he's a very generous man. Um, and he taught me. I'd never been on a set longer than 3 weeks until I got this job. And what I really learned from Paddy was the idea of how to pace yourself for a job like this, where you're maybe doing one scene for a whole day. That doesn't usually happen in anything else. So when you've got that much time, you don't know when to keep your powder dry, when to, just keep that balance. And I
Mm.
talked to him quite a bit about that. But then he just keeps you in a good mood most of the day because we fuck around a lot.
I love that. And it's interesting you just mentioned pacing yourself. What I want to know is was it super challenging in a part like this where there's so many time jumps, like finding where you are as your character? Was that kind of a crazy thing?
Yeah, it was. It was. Yeah, I did a scene in episode 5, and I hadn't shot anything of 5 for about 2 months or something. And then we came to do this scene, and thank goodness Ryan Condal was in the room. I said, "Oh right," because this is a few months later, and he was like, "No, no, Gavin, this is like 3 years later." And I'm like, "Oh shit, right, okay, yes, that does change things slightly. Thank you." But you've always got these brilliant people around, continuity, etc., to help.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so cool how seamless the whole cast does that. And it's interesting, just speaking of Patty, I'm just thinking about Viserys here, a great quote he had to Lionel where he says, "Your advice has been sage, unmarked by self-interest, which stands in contrast to all others." Would you, Gavin, agree with that about Lionel or think Viserys is kind of wrong there?
No, I think 100%. He's the only time that is the only time he's ever going to say something that would be controversial because he knows the king didn't want to accept that news. Was
Mm,
being willfully
mm.
blind, and he was a very loyal, decent man. Lionel. His family had all been like that. His father and grandfather. Was it his father or his grandfather? His grandfather had been Hand of the King, Osmond. So there's a tradition of being very loyal people and not really having. I mean, he's a lord. He doesn't need for anything. But I
Right.
don't. He never really wanted to sit on the Iron Throne. It's just this madness of everybody else in this series is like they want to sit on this massive piece of metal. But he wasn't like that.
Yeah, that's interesting answer. And it's interesting too, because you mentioned his grandfather, but I'm also wondering too, with Lionel in the books, also two daughters he has, he had three
Yeah,
wives. Are you considering any of this in your portrayal, or is it important to kind of just keep that separate and focus on the script is?
I read all the sections I felt that were revolving around Lionel and moments that I felt were important for my story in it. So I read a fair amount of the book, but I I like to use it as like a given circumstance, as just like a load of food sitting in the background. So it is all there. There is a knowledge of that. I went to the Citadel. I had 6 links. He's an intelligent man. He doesn't. He knows all the laws of the kingdom, and he doesn't. He's so he was so. He always felt very knowledgeable that he never questioned himself or his motives. It felt very
Right.
pure.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I'm also wondering with the character of Lionel, what do you imagine went wrong with his son Loris? Like what why is he so troubled? Why does he end up killing his own father and his son? What happened there?
Yeah, well, we talked about it actually. Ryan and myself and Matt Needham, who plays Laris, about where's this bitterness come from? Where's this lust for his power and etc. And we decided that, unfortunately, during that period, we call it a medieval period, they weren't giving to people with who were different, and that happened with your man in Thrones. I've forgotten the character's name now. Peter
Tyrion.
Tyrion, yes. The shit that he went through, and it motivated him. And the same things happened with Laris. He's born with his clubfoot, and maybe he had been treated poorly by his father and his other siblings. Not necessarily, I think, by Harwin, but I think maybe we did actually come up with the story that maybe his mother had died in childbirth,
Mm.
and there was a bitterness from Lionel towards him about that. Because why did Lionel have so many wives? And we figured, well, maybe one of them's died in childbirth, and maybe it was because of this
Mm.
deformity he'd had, and so there was something there. We worked out there was a bitterness.
Okay, yeah. So it's not like he's just getting around town lying with all these different wives. I like that answer you gave. And it's interesting too. It seems like you guys didn't film everything in order. So did you like jump into the death scene with Lionel? Like, did you always know episode 6 was going to be the final episode? Like, how did that kind of go about with the death?
Yeah, no, I knew Simon as soon as I was offered the gig what it was, which was heartbreaking. Because you're
Yeah.
like, no, I want to be optioned for 6 years, please. But I knew what it was going in. But of course, the same as doing any piece of drama, you can never play the final scene. You can only play the moment that you're in. So it was always sad to know that we were going to film that scene. But I had a horrendous cold the day we filmed it, and I had a really bad cough. It wasn't COVID because we were being tested within an inch of our lives, and I couldn't. I had to scream when I was banging this door down. Harwin! I had no voice. Sounded like some sort of deranged seal.
I think it worked for the scene though. So I think it's a blessing there. And
Yeah.
it's interesting too. Do you see like just how we're talking about the character? It seems like to me there's a lot more to explore with him in his past. Could you see maybe there's a possibility we see him return in some fashion, maybe another prequel series or anything like that?
Oh, I'd love to. I mean, what's interesting is there's 10 years. There's 10 years that's happened between, well, you know very well. There's 10 years between those eps 5 and 6. And Lionel's been the hand of the king for those 10 years. And there's been peace. And actually, things, apart from Viserys' health, have been ticking along all right. So there is opportunity for there's something to happen there, but there would have to be some drama or backstory. It'd be a stretch, but you never know in this world.
Oh
But
yeah, I think people would love to see it too. And I mean, many fans are already saying that he's the best hand ever in the Game of Thrones
yeah.
universe. Is that a good feeling to hear that you're so loved by fans, this character? And also, do you agree with him being the best hand in this universe that we've seen?
That's a really tricky question. As an actor and as a viewer, he's not as exciting.
Okay.
There's some certain Lannisters that were rather fascinating. Hands of the King. Um, it's very rewarding to know how much they loved him, because we felt that he was, with the showrunners and the other writers, we felt that he was a very decent man, and hopefully that would be reflected. But you can never tell what a reception of a character is going to be until it's out there. So I think, yes, that's been really rewarding. I mean, it's not me. I mean, it is Lionel. I mean, I think I'm quite. I smile a lot more than Lionel, and I talk a lot more than Lionel. Uh, but in essence, it's just me wearing his shoes. So it does. There's a nice. He'll always have a special place, definitely. And it's nice that the fans have felt that way. It's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, but big reason that too is your performance. So that's part of it. And I think that if it wasn't you, it wouldn't be the same reaction. So
thanks, Steve. That's very kind. Cheers, mate.
oh, no problem. And also, before I let you go, Gavin, I want to know too, what in your just whole career, what will you take away most from this experience, just as an actor, and maybe just as a person, with being on such a big show with such a good reception?
I don't know what one thing I would take away, because it was the greatest professional experience of my life. Really, I had I love being on set anyway. Whatever I'm filming, I enjoy being on set with, especially on something this big. With there was 1,400 people, I think, maybe even 1,800. I think, I can't remember the number, working on the production, and you get to know so many of them so well, intimately, and they were so good. Everybody is so good at their job that it reinforced my love of all the different departments. How I really am fascinated by, the grips and the dolly boys, and the gaffers, and all the hair and makeup, and I just really love the people on set, and it has reinforced that, and how much I love doing it, because I spent 20 odd years mainly being in the theatre, which I love as much in a very different way. But there is something special about the people on the TV and film set.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm excited to see what you do next. I think it's great exposure for you and people to kind of follow your career who are big TV nuts like me. So, Gavin, thank you so much for joining me today, man. And everybody, watch House of the Dragon every Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern, HBO Max. I hope to talk to you in the future one day, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.